Today we're going to talk about the National Association of Realtors, referred to as NAR, and this is our lawsuit settlement that has been in the news a lot, and you probably want to know what's happening, and we're going to break it all down for you and let you know how this affects people buying real estate.
So what happened was there was a lawsuit out in the state of Missouri that turned into a full class action lawsuit, and a bunch of other states also started jumping in, and it basically just alleged that some sellers didn't understand how the commissions were being split between buyer and seller. So then the National Association of Realtors filed a settlement that said, well, tell you what, we'll settle for this amount instead, and we'll make all these big sweeping changes throughout the industry. So the big ones that are changing is it has to do with how people are getting paid, but then also making sure that buyers have their own representation within a real estate transaction, instead of how it's always kind of been typically the seller had their representation and then sometimes the buyer had their own, or it was a little bit more vague or muddy.
Okay.
And so really what this did was it created a new set of rules that are coming into play in August 17th nationwide, but in our area in Santa Cruz County, Santa Clara County, and a couple others nearby, it's actually starting August 12th.
What's changing for a buyer? So if I'm a buyer and I'm coming to go look at this house, what's going to change? What am I going to see that's going to feel different as I go out to look at properties and things?
So previously, they find the home online, they request a tour from the agent. We'll go out there, show them the home. If they like it, then we sit down and talk about, okay, here's what an offer would have to look like. Here is how people get paid. Here's how things work. But really what this is now intending us to do, instead of having that conversation at the end of the game when we're writing an offer, we're gonna start having it up front with buyers, where we're gonna sit down with them, show this is what the buying process looks like. These are the steps we're going to go through. And before I can even show you a home, we have to have a written agreement that basically outlines who you're working with. Are you working exclusively or non-exclusively? And then how much the agent is being paid within that transaction. And so this is something that actually has to happen prior to showing any homes. And this is what the big change is before it was a little bit more ambiguous of, I could go work with multiple buyers, show them multiple houses, and we won't worry about it till later. Now we're being forced to actually take care of that up front, which is actually good for the consumer because they get the answers prior to even going out and seeing the houses. But one big question that this has raised that we wanted to answer was, does the seller no longer has to pay a commission to the buyer's agent that brought the buyer in?
Yeah, that's a big change. That's the kind of the one that the media's been on the biggest, right? And it has changed, and the way it's changed is when you list a property, the listing broker would always, we would negotiate a fee that would be predetermined in there, and then we would also talk with the seller about how much of that fee do we want to share with the buying brokerage. That's all gone away now.
Yeah.
So the conversation with sellers is just, this is our fee for selling your property, and then we go over all of our services, and that's pretty much it. So can a seller still, if they want to incentivize selling their property, offer some sort of concession to the buyer or the buyer's agent to, hey, bring me that buyer?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. That can totally be done. It has to be addressed though between the buyer's agent and the buyer. That's a conversation that the other half of the transaction you're going to have. As far as if you're a buyer, you're going to talk with your buyer's agent, and they're going to talk to you about options and what that fee may be, and you guys will come up with a number that everybody's happy with. Then when you find your property and you go talk to that seller or the seller's agent, you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we love your home, we're going to make you an offer. Part of that offer is going to have maybe some seller concessions, which we've had for decades.
Right.
I mean, this is nothing new.
We just did a pretty big seller concession, right? It's a very typical thing.
And what it is the seller basically saying, hey, we're going to build it into our price that, hey, here's some funds that we're going to give back to you at closing to cover your loan costs. Well, concessions and fees and commissions, all this is going to be part of, could be part of those concessions and go towards your closing costs. And so as a buyer, your closing costs, they're going to be higher than what you would have had, last month. However, it's still coming from the same pot at the end of the day. And that's kind of the hardest message to deliver that I think consumers are confused about. And frankly, a lot of agents are confused about.
And really, it's really just because it's a change in the process.
Exactly.
For the most part, we haven't seen a change in the numbers. We haven't seen a change even in where the funds are coming from. But really, it's just that the process has changed, and change is always a little muddy, right? But we want to start getting the message out now that it's like, yes, this change is coming. Here's how it's going to work. And ultimately, if it makes it more transparent for the consumer, we're happy with that.
100%.
But another concern I know I've heard buyers say is, what happens if they don't have the funds to pay the agent, right? Like, especially first-time buyers, if they're taking all their savings, they're cashing out some stocks, they're doing everything they can just to get into the home, how do they pay this agent? And will this prevent them from being able to buy a home?
Yeah, and to me, this is the biggest problem. You know, I think the transparency is really good, but this is the biggest issue. This is the first time buyer is really, wow, we've got to now cover this fee that was typically paid for by the seller. So this, again, sellers, listen up here. This is a big thing. It's going to be difficult for these buyers to cover some of these fees. You still have control of the transaction. If you control it, we can negotiate with a buyer. They'll pay more for a property if they know they don't have to come up with fees to pay that buyer. This is not something that we just started doing yesterday, but this is, a key thing I've always told sellers: be in control of the transaction. Don't rely on somebody else, because then you can decide to yes or no and not let somebody else tell you what to do. So I think, yes, sellers, you will be able to offer concessions to the buyer, so that a buyer is, first time buyer, they're a vet, maybe they have, no money down, the VA loan. You can still compensate that agent so that they do a good job, reduce your liability as a seller, because now you have a buyer that has their own fiduciary duty, right, to their client. So it just cleaned it all the way around. Again, we've got all this information available to you. We just want to keep you guys in the know, so you really are up to date on what's happening. And at EF Homes here, everybody is trained, prepared. We've got all this information for you. So if you want specifics, copies of these contracts, we'll share them with you, just so you know what you're doing ahead of time. Again, never, we cannot, emphasize this enough. It's never too soon to reach out to us on your real estate journey. Again, a little bit of advice, and you can take that, and 5 years from now, give us a call when you're ready. Whatever it is, we're here. So, reach out to Jason or myself. We got all of our contact info in this video. Hope you enjoyed it. We're really excited, and we'll talk to you guys all soon.